You may have heard of the newlyweds, where every Sunday the new husband noticed that the bride cut off both ends of the roast before she put it in the oven. He finally worked up the courage to ask, "Honey, how come you always cut the ends of the roast off before you cook it?" And she answered, "That's because that's how my mother always did it." So next time he saw his mother in law, he asked her, "How come you always cut the ends of the roast off before you cook it?" And she answered, "That's because that's how my mother always did it." As luck would have it, Grandma was in town and he asked her, "How come you always cut off the ends of the roast?" And she smiled and said, "Well, that's simple. I had a very small roasting pan and the roast wouldn't fit in it otherwise." Sometimes in education, we do the things we do because that's how we've seen them done, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the most effective. I'm going to come back to this roast cutting business, but first I want to introduce you to my family. My husband and I have raised 9 children. Our baby turns 27 in a couple of weeks. We homeschooled, public schooled, charter schooled, private schooled, online schooled, unschooled, and did combinations of all of the above. By current educational standards, you might say we are a success story. All 9 of our children have graduated from universities, with several pursuing and earning advanced degrees. I simply did what I saw others doing, but I always felt like something was missing. Something important was being cut out of the process. I've studied educational philosophies for many years, but it wasn't until I stumbled across the writings of a group of educators who lived 100 years ago that I could clearly identify for myself what has gone missing. Most of what I'll be sharing with you is what they have taught me. Above all, they have caused me to rethink the whole purpose of education. I saw one recent study that asked the question, "What's the purpose of education?" They polled 365 people and got 365 different answers. I would like to give you answer number 366. For many reasons, I have come to believe that the purpose of education is to prepare children to live lives of maximum joy. Careers, college, and jobs may be part of the journey, but they're no longer the destination for me. Most children are in school for nearly 20 years, easily a quarter or a third of most lives. Shouldn't we be spending much more time in teaching them the art of living well? I'll tell you my driving force. If you think you love your children, just wait until grandkids come along. Just when I thought I couldn't love more, their little faces are in front of me all the time, and I worry about the world we're leaving to them. They're facing spiritual, moral, and financial collapse. There are wars and rumors of war. The world is turning upside down. That which used to be called good is now called evil, and that which was evil is now called good. Love is growing cold. Freedom is at risk. Again, no one in the history of the world has managed to hold on to it. And yet, I have great hope. Every generation has faced its own challenges. Traditionally, it's given to the older generation to pass along instructions to the younger generation on how to overcome those challenges and climb to higher places. I've read a lot of history, and the one constant is there are diamond souls in every generation. Men and women and children whose hearts never fail them, no matter how big the storm rages around them, no matter how high the waves or how strong the winds, they stand firm and strong in perfect peace and joy. Their treasure is within and is not dependent upon any outward circumstance. I'm interested in the education of diamond souls. As I studied the writings I mentioned, along with studying the lives of these diamond souls, a pattern for learning became fixed in my mind. I'm going to spend the first part of this presentation unfolding that simple pattern to you. There's one word that keeps coming back to me, most often from mothers who implement it: peace. They tell me that as they take it to heart, all the fears, doubts, and worries about kids falling behind or not doing enough have all faded away, and they're actually enjoying the journey. After I unfold the pattern, I'll give you a lot of practical tips and ideas for implementing it. I don't have all the answers. I'm on the same journey as you, but these may give you some ideas to work with. Many of you may already be doing some kind of notebooking. I'll show you what I've been doing with a heart-based slant. And for those of you who live in states that require proof of work, these notebooks can help fulfill that. These are my notebooks. They're like books of remembering or remembrance. It's not how much knowledge can we pour through our children, but rather how many things can we help them hold on to. Among other things, these notebooks will help them learn to read for meaning and write with a purpose. And for those of you on a tight budget, I'm going to share a lot of resources that are absolutely free. I'll only have time to give you a brief introduction, but if these ideas resonate with you, at the end of this presentation, I'll show you where you can learn more, as well as how you can join a community of families who are trying to do the same things. Our schools are having to fit learning into a very small roasting pan that is getting smaller every day because of the demands placed on them. The current focus of our schools is on training the minds of our children. The buzzwords are critical thinking skills and scientific reasoning. Minds are fed with facts and information that can readily be organized into grade-level curriculum and tested, providing measurable outcomes demanded by those who hand the money out to our schools. You can't score kindness or honesty, so it's being cut out of the roasting pan. The mind functions in the realm of science, which is, in its essence, all about discovering the laws, rules, principles upon which everything in the world and the universe operates. And so we teach our children the rules of math, the rules of grammar, punctuation and spelling, the rules of phonics and writing. We teach them the laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, and the laws of economics. The words law and order go together. Complying with rules creates order. If you've ever traveled to a foreign country where there are no traffic laws, you know how chaotic and dangerous it is to drive. On the other hand, scientists who gaze out in the universe are struck with awe at the perfect order, harmony, and majesty of galaxies and stars and planets, all abiding the laws within their respective spheres. There are also principles and laws by which civilizations prosper and flourish. Our liberty is in law. Even happiness is governed by law. Law is a good thing, which is why it puzzles me when I hear of students asking their teachers why they have to learn all the rules, and the teacher responds, "You have to learn the rules so you can break them." Throwing out all the rules seems to be the hallmark of this generation. Just do whatever feels good. We have millions of little girls all across the nation singing, "No right or wrong, no rules for me, I'm free, let it go." For a system that prides itself on reason and logic, spending all this time learning rules so that we can break them is, in the word of Mr. Spock, illogical. But I digress. This type of learning is systematic and sequential. You have to learn the rules of arithmetic before you can master the rules of algebra. Facts and information are hard to hold on to, and most go into short-term memory. Much of the time in school is spent trying to get information to stick. The mind is bombarded with so much it has to have a reason to hold on to it. A child may hold on to facts long enough to take the test, but then after the test, they tend to wash away. We use a word for this type of learning that goes on in school. We call it academic learning. Have you ever looked up the definition of academic? I have to admit I was a little surprised, but this is what it says in the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary. Having no practical importance, not involving or relating to anything real or practical, having no practical or useful significance. And we want more rigorous academics. We want to extend the academic year and start academics at younger and younger ages. What we've seemed to have forgotten and have cut off is something Aristotle understood over 2,000 years ago. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Plato also understood All learning is based in emotion. The heart develops before the brain within the womb, and emotions develop before the intellect outside the womb. The heart is what pumps life into the brain. A person is still alive as long as the heart is still pumping, even if brain waves have ceased. But a brain cannot function without the heart. Yet, as I said, we're cutting the heart out of education. The heart is fed with feelings, impressions, and images, all unmeasurable and so discounted by our schools that rely upon test scores and statistics. This learning falls within the realm of the arts. You can even find the word art in the word heart, which includes music, poetry, pictures, and story. This stage of learning is all about desire, of warming and opening up the heart. Childhood is for feeling the wonders of nature, the enchantment of stories, the magic of numbers and shapes, for stirring young hearts with pictures and music and singing. Sometimes it feels like we take the kids backstage and show them in minute technical detail all that goes on behind performing a magic trick without ever letting them first feel the magic. If you don't feel the magic, why would you care about all the technicalities? Yet, what's the first thing you say when you see an awesome magic trick? How did he do that? Feel the magic first, and then you'll have a captive audience backstage. Learning in this stage can be random and spontaneous because impressions made on the heart go into long-term memory and are held onto long enough to connect and interlace with other impressions. If a fact can be connected to something the heart cares about, it places the fact in long-term storage also. Cutting out the heart is not good. Studies reveal emotional well-being of college students is at its lowest level in 25 years. Over half of college students in one particular study reported severe feelings of hopelessness and despair. Over half. And in the job market, as one employer put it, they're getting lots of resumes from hopeful engineers, but what they're looking for and not finding are engineers with personality. These are symptoms of heart problems arising from our neglect of the heart. Now, here's the other part that the strict confines of our schools won't allow: spirit. I was reading an old 1909 chemistry textbook, and it talked about the 5 elements the ancients identified: air, water, earth, fire, and the 5th was an element they could sense was there, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. It was a spiritual element, and they called it ether. In the spirit of scientific inquiry that tests and measures only that which you can see and handle, the 5th element was dropped. Yet we still hold on to the word ether in the word ethereal, which describes something heavenly or celestial, something of another dimension, something higher than us. The spirit is fed with light, a sort of spiritual sunshine. In the creation story, light was the first order of the day, and the source of that light wasn't the sun. The sun didn't come along until after the creation of the plants. To be inspired means to take in spirit. This falls in the realm of faith, because you have to believe in something you cannot handle or measure. It's the same evidential demands of scientific inquiry that keeps talk of the spiritual out of our schools. I can't see the wind either or hold it in my hands, but I can see it moving the leaves on the trees and can feel it blowing on my face. If we have not felt it ourselves, we can still see the Spirit's effect in the lives of others and listen to those who have felt it. Men like Columbus, who said, "It was the Lord who put into my mind. I could feel his hand upon me, the fact that it would be possible to sail from here to the Indies. For the execution of the journey, I did not make use of intelligence, mathematics, or maps." Or Michelangelo, "My unassisted heart is barren clay. That of its native self can nothing feel." Or Brahms, I will tell you about my method of communication with the infinite, for all truly inspired ideas come from God. Beethoven, who was my ideal, was well aware of this. When I feel the urge, I begin by appealing directly to my Maker. Straightway the ideas flow in upon me, directly from God, clothed in right forms, harmonies, and orchestrations. Harriet Beecher Stowe prayed the Lord would use her writing skills to help bring down slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin came to her in a series of visions, and it finally put a personal face to the slave issue. Julia Ward Howe had toured a Civil War battleground. That night, she woke to write down the words to the Battle Hymn of the Republic that flowed through her as if by dictation. These are not rare events. They were common and frequently talked about in older school books before we cut out the spirit out of education. I don't expect we'll produce another Shakespeare or Michelangelo or Beethoven until we once again allow and encourage the flow of inspiration. It appears this spiritual light is all about creation, but it can't create from nothing. We supply the raw materials, and the Spirit helps organize them into something wonderful and useful. Its crowning glory is to help us build joyful lives. The Spirit is the ultimate alchemist, turning our iron bricks of knowledge into pure gold. The direction is always upward, to make us better, wiser, and happier. It too operates on laws that happen to be found in a book, an international bestseller that's been around for hundreds of years and is banned by our schools. The Spirit can work wonders with a young person or adult whose heart is open and full of desire and has demonstrated a willingness to play by the rules. Each and every one of us has something unique to contribute to the world that the Spirit unfolds to us individually. No life is too small or insignificant. So learning with the Spirit becomes very directed and purposeful, which is especially critical today. If you started reading and finished a book every single day, you will still be reading 60,000 years from now and not have made your way through the books registered in the Library of Congress. With today's print-on-demand technology, there are some estimates that 3,000 new titles are being added every single day. This year, there will be more unique pieces of information generated worldwide than the previous 5,000 years combined. People much smarter than me are expecting that human knowledge will soon double every 72 hours. Who of us can begin to navigate that on our own? The Spirit puts us on an individualized, customized course of study, often leading us to hidden treasures of knowledge, as is expressed in Charlotte Mason's writings. True education is between a child's soul and God. Our job is to prepare our children to be inspired. We have to be careful that we don't so tightly structure their courses of study and time that there's no time or space for the Spirit to work. The Spirit works best in large chunks of solitude, one-on-one with the child. Some people spend their entire lives ever learning but never putting it to any use. They stockpile bricks of knowledge that are never used to build anything. Have you ever noticed a stream in the mountain that's gotten dammed up? The water starts to stagnate and get murky. The stream has to keep moving to remain pure and refreshing. Our learning also needs a creative outlet. This the Spirit helps us to do. The more we give the Spirit to work with, the more it can accomplish with our lives. This stage of learning is infinite and eternal. As I mentioned earlier, I see this pattern of learning in many of the great lives. Childhoods filled with story and wonder, then a bit of academic study, and then much time in solitude, studying, pondering, creating through inspiration. I recognize this pattern of learning in the Bible. Both the Old and New Testaments are front and loaded with stories. Most of the stories we're familiar with are in Genesis and the four Gospels. Then those are followed by laws, commandments, rules, doctrines, and principles. In the Old Testament, we're given several case studies of what happens when people follow the rules and when they don't. Mostly they don't. In the New Testament, we're given just one case study, Paul applying the law that replaced all the other commandments, the law of love. The back end of the books require much preparatory learning and understanding. A kindergartner isn't going to get much out of Isaiah or Revelation, and the meaning is completely closed shut to the literal mind. And even to the learned, much of the meaning can only be communicated spirit to spirit. If we follow this same pattern, first, warming and opening hearts with stories, pictures, and music before we attempt to teach the facts and rules, and then be careful to not so overstructure the learning process so there's no room for the spirit, I believe we'll see new life and light and purpose in the eyes of our children. Take away the spirit and heart of learning, and all that's left is purely academic. The good news is you have no restrictions at home. There's no need to cut off both ends. I'm going to spend the rest of our time together in this presentation focusing on the first part, warming and opening the hearts of children. To start, I want to plant two images in your mind. The first one I'm going to give you a picture for. Have you ever watched a mother duck? All her little ducklings follow her around everywhere and do exactly what they see her doing. The second image you're going to have to paint for yourself because it doesn't exist in the duck world for someone to take a picture of. Picture the mother duck from behind quacking orders for her little ducklings, telling them what to do and where to go. Can't you see them all scattering, completely frustrated and bewildered? This is the phrase to remember when you're educating the heart. Show them. Don't tell them. In a heart-based education, you're going to want to be the first mother duck. As I present ideas, if you're asking, how am I going to get my kids to do this? You're asking the wrong question. The right question is this something I want to do? Is this something I can see myself doing? If your answer is yes, I can guarantee your success because the end result is you're going to give your kids the gift of a warm-hearted mother. And as has been said, only a warm heart can kindle warmth in another. And the odds are in your favor that your kids, especially if they're younger, like little ducklings, will do exactly what they see you do. Look on homeschooling as primarily an opportunity to educate yourself and bring the kids alongside. Developmentally, the first 8 years are reserved by nature for the heart. A child's heart is open and impressionable. Trying to force academics at this age often ends in tears and frustrations because they are not developmentally ready. So what does heart-based learning look like at this age? First of all, large chunks of free imaginative play. Play is the work of childhood. Their little growing bodies aren't meant to be stuck behind desks for hours at a time. They're meant to be jumping and running, skipping, twirling, and climbing, preferably in fresh air and sunshine. These are the years for touching, tasting, feeling, for immersion in color, not the artificial colors of cartoons, but the vibrant colors of nature. There's no need to create a unit study for green. Just step outside and say, look how green the grass is. Lesson learned. It's a time for playing lots of games so children can experience for themselves that rules create order and cheaters ruin the fun. And I've found it's much easier to learn the rules while I'm playing the game. Sprinkle in generous helpings of stories, singing, rhyming, and pictures. These are the years for creating strong emotional bonds with family members that will become an anchor for life, for making lasting impressions that home is safe and a good place to be. Children will remember the tone in your voice and how it felt to be around you, much more than any words you say to them. Let them feel that learning and work are good and a natural part of life. These are the years to make impressions of the good, the true, and the beautiful, which will become the core of a child's heart and begin to determine the kind of person that child will grow up to be. There is only one way to improve the taste of a nation. It cannot be done in a hurry, and it cannot be done by force. It can only be accomplished by exposing the people patiently to that which is truly good, to that which is truly noble. Try and persuade our children to make the good choice for themselves by exposing them just as much as possible to that which is the true product of divine inspiration and honest human craftsmanship. In the end, those able to see and look for themselves will then be able to make the right decisions, and because they will do it of their own volition, it will be a lasting one. I think that sums up our task at hand. Next, we'll talk about the languages of the heart.